My name's Doug Rogers. I was the last owner of Slabtown. There were multiple owners there when it was a hipster spot and venue, but I was the last one. I was the person who turned it into an all ages space. I ran it for the last 3 years that it was around. I've been involved in the music scene here in Portland since the time that I moved here back in 92, I think it was, working with a group of people doing house shows. I got involved with KPSU and was one of the founding members of that. Put on shows for them, did radio with them. Kind of moved out of the scene a little bit for a little while, and then because I was focusing pretty heavily on work and going back to school, and then got back into the swing of things in 2012 when I bought Slabby. Slabby closed 1 year ago on November 1st. So it's been, yeah, just about exactly a year. A couple weeks more. I had been uh, looking to start a venue that when I left my job working with teenagers, I really didn't have anything else to do, but I knew that I couldn't work there anymore. So I started looking around for a venue to start. I had always, I'd been inspired by a lot of venues when I was growing up, when I was younger. The Gilman Street Project down in the Bay Area was a really powerful one for me. Getting up here to Portland and being here at the tail end of the X-Ray Cafe days was really important to me. Satyricon probably influenced our bathrooms more than any other venue. Um, all of those were really places that kind of inspired me. I knew that I wanted to kind of replicate, and then Slabtown went up for sale. I bought it. Uh, January of 2012, we opened our doors. February 2012. By November of that year, I had it running as a combination 21 and over and all ages space. And yeah, and then we just plowed ahead trying to do five, six, 7 shows a week, all the way up until the end. I was underfunded pretty much from the get go. Um, so that made things really difficult. We fell into debt really early. We're constantly fighting to pay off the debt at the same time that we were trying to get our doors or keep our doors open. And the thing that killed us at the end was there were two issues with our landlord. One was not fixing the leaks in the roof. Um, and so water would leak down literally from the apartments and from rainwater. So we would either get water from people's sinks or we'd get it from the rain. And and then when the furnace burned out, he collected the insurance money and put some garage heaters in that weren't wired properly and didn't work. Found out later that the landlord was bankrupt, so we couldn't get the repairs done. Never would have happened. And he since sold the building, and I just ran into somebody doing survey work uh, there, and they're going to tear it down sometime in the next couple months. Yeah. Um, yeah, it was. Slabtown closing was one of the most painful things I've ever gone through. Um, I put more of myself into Slabtown than I've ever put into anything else in my life. Any project, any person, anything. Um, and that was, for somebody who grew up in San Jose, that was the most community that I had ever felt. And when Slabtown closed, I went from working 6 shows a week, working there 7 days a week, constantly being around people, constantly being around my coworkers and my friends and people in the music community, to like literally 24 hours later being totally disconnected from people. That they went on and had to find other jobs and had to move on with their lives. And I needed to lick my wounds for a couple months. And yeah, all of a sudden I was alone and depressed and out of work and um, and broke and in debt. And and I think a year later, I'm just starting to get over that. Uh, it was, yeah, it was, yeah, it was crazy, and and then the thing that also really hurt, that continually pulled the scabs off, was that everywhere I went, people would recognize me. I would go to shows, and people that I didn't know would come up and hug me. Like they'd be wearing a Slabtown shirt and they would come up and hug me. And I'm like, who the hell are you? I would go to the bookstore and the woman at the register would recognize me. I'd be in the line at the DMV. I'd be buying a set of sunglasses everywhere I went, like just about daily. Um, People would recognize me and tell me how much they missed Slabtown and how they hated to see us go. And, that hurt. It hurt really, really badly. Um, to feel like I had let down the community by not having the, I don't know, the business skills or something to keep the place open. And the reality was that if we had rainwater and water from the apartments upstairs coming down through the ceiling and we didn't have any heat heading into the winter, we couldn't stay open. We just weren't going to. We needed business besides the venue business to stay open. We weren't ever going to grow that with those problems. So, I mean, I don't believe in this whole forgive yourself bullshit. Give yourself permission to feel this and all that kind of crap. Like, I don't believe in that. But I had to recognize that there were certain things that were out of my control, and to recognize that it wasn't necessarily me who was letting people down. It wasn't all the result of decisions that I made. But there were some decisions that I made that weren't the best business moves. Um, trying to piss off our neighbors was kind of a bad idea. Coming out in the newspaper as being pro graffiti in the neighborhood was maybe not a bad, or maybe not a good business decision. The signs that we had that specifically tried to piss people off, we would set up. Every day it would say something different on it. You know, this is Slabtown, not the Pearl. You've been warned. Um, I think my favorite one was uh, "Daddy drinks because you cry." And things like that didn't bring people in from the Pearl District or from Northwest 21st or 23rd, to check out our bar. We were not the most welcoming place to the neighbors. Um,
I like the spitting distance.
yeah, within yeah, Slabtown, within spitting distance of the Pearl for all your spitting pleasure. Within rock throwing distance of the Pearl, rocks 25 cents each. So when I walked into Slabtown, I was I was pretty much on my own. Um, I had run a nonprofit school for a while, so I had some manager experience and some financial experience, but um, I was otherwise pretty much on my own. I had my best friend came in, this guy Dave Fisher, who was my best friend at the time. He and I are still, good buddies, but uh, he came in and designed our menu for us and kind of took over that part of it, and I ran everything else. So uh, yeah, I was putting in 7 day. I worked 7 days a week. I was working 10 to 14 hour days. So I was working 70 to 90 hours a week. Um, in the entire time that I owned Slabtown, there were 3 days out of that whole period of 3 years that I didn't show up for work for at least a few hours to take care of business or this, that, or the other thing. Um, it was, there were always things that needed to be done. At the beginning, I was at every show that we ever put on. At the end, I allowed myself like a little bit of a break in that. But at the beginning, yeah, I was at every show and, was then there bright and early. And somewhere around a year and a half in, my body collapsed. It just gave out. I was living off 2 packs of cigarettes, three, four, five Red Bulls, 4 pints of coffee a day and maybe one meal, and my body gave out. So I ended up staying with my girlfriend, and she lives around the corner. Lived around the corner. We live together here now. Um, and I would be able to walk downstairs, walk over to Slabtown, put in about 3 hours, 2 hours, 4 hours, and then I would collapse again, and I'd have to, drag myself back home and climb back into bed and then sleep for the rest of the time until I would get up the next day and do it. And finally my body healed enough for me to go back to work at the level that I wanted to. Um, but I lost somewhere around 35, 40 pounds at the time. I've pleasantly put on some of that weight and have gotten a little bit healthier. Um, but yeah, I was driven. I was obsessed. We were, um, in a lot of ways, we were like religious zealots there. We all got matching Slabtown tattoos. Um, we all spent insane amounts of time there. We all loved the place. The all ages kids who volunteered there, um, were amazing and just spent so much time and energy and never really got paid for it, you know? And, but it's just like what we lived all the time. And we spent our off hours there, and yeah, we just loved that place. It was home. It wasn't just a venue or a bar. Like that was where we lived. Like I slept on the couch during the day sometimes to take a nap, and um, yeah, it was much more than a bar and a venue to us, the people who worked there.
Now, East End, they had a fire.
Yeah, they did.
And,
And my band played the last show there, and that was just a coincidence.
so, okay, so we lost
We lost East
Slabtown,
End.
we lost East
East
End.
End.
Um,
We lost the Matador as far as dive bars go.
yeah,
Um, at the time, Blackwater Records was not doing shows. They were getting ready to open again, but the place where they had been having shows, that was kind of an underground spot, was shut down. The Analog was not doing all ages shows. About a year before we closed, um, Backspace closed, so that had been a major all ages venue here. Katie O'Brien's stopped doing shows. Yeah,
yeah.
what it comes down to is, it's chickens coming home to roost. That we've been planning this and building this for at least a decade to create the situation that we're in now. That so many people have moved here in the last 10 years because this is such a cool place, and and we can't, it's changed the city. That rents are going up. You can't afford to run a venue on $2 Pabst beers. I mean, you have to sell 1,000 or 1,500 of them a month just to do the rent. Much less, to pay your people. And there are a couple of or there's at least one. There's at least one venue in our area, and I'm not going to name names, but they don't even pay their bartenders. Their bartenders just get tips. They started there volunteering as friends, and it's just become policy. And that type of mentality around things is, or those kinds of actions, those ways of doing business, um, that's what people are being forced to choose about. Are you going to stick to your ethics? Are you going to do things the right way? Or are you going to work every scam that you can? Or work every angle that you can? Or find every way of making money that you can? And, when I moved here, people were complaining about transplants and people moving here then. But the thing was, like, I moved here and the scene was small enough and the city was small enough. It was a little bit more than half the size that it is now. That if you were in the music scene, you started meeting people face to face, and you got to know people pretty quickly if you were participating in it. And that's not happening now. It's too big. There's too many people, and And there's a distance there also that you could walk up to anybody on stage and introduce yourself at a show at the X-Ray or Satyricon, and and they would respond as if you were a human being. And I think and Slabtown represented that too. But overall, like it's not like that anymore. That at a lot of clubs and venues, it's the big ones that are surviving, or it's the ones that are owned by somebody who runs multiple venues and who can weather the up and down that comes with tour season and things along those lines. Um, but we've been sowing the seeds for Barmageddon forever. That the people who are moving here, they may look like us, but they're not us. Um, you know, they didn't earn their store bought tattoos. Uh, they've got these little genetically modified dogs that they purchased somewhere. Um, it's just they have these conservative Republican values, and they're not us. Um, and I believe in being an elitist in a way, that it's like there's us, and then there's the normals, and the normals are when it gets down to it, they're not very welcoming with us. So then you get a lot of people moving here. They may have a PBR, thing on the back of their jacket, but that's not what they drink. They're out there getting, you know, fucking urine infused vodka with hot peppers and all this other shit, for $9 a drink, and it's bullshit. And that's what people want, and they're willing to pay it. And they don't want a dirty little dive. Like, it's just not what they do. And they may look like us, but they're not part of our culture. They're they're into something else. So as more and more of those people have moved here, those people who look like us but aren't us, who think that this is a cool place because of the music that it's produced, they're not producing music. They're going to the Doug Fir to see bigger touring bands or hip touring bands or whatever. Not to say anything bad about the Doug Fir, because the Doug Fir does an awesome job with what it is that they do. But they're not a DIY club. They've never been designed to be a DIY club. That club was a DIY club when it was the Chinese Gardens. And if I remember right, that was being run by the same people who ended up buying East End. So, or the same, it's definitely the same group of people, same group of friends. That was a DIY club. We no longer, I don't feel like we have in Portland the same level of DIY culture that we used to have. We have a lot of people who are doing it themselves, and they do interesting things themselves. And if you come to Portland and you ask somebody, like, what do you do? They don't tell you about your job, about their job. They tell you about their knitting. They tell you about the garden that they do. They tell you about their band, or how they spend volunteer time, or whatever. They got a new rain barrel to collect the water off their roof, or some bullshit like that. Not bullshit, but something like that. The new people who are moving here, it's different. You ask them what they do, and it's like, I'm a graphic designer. I work for Adidas. Okay, so you work for fucking Adidas, but what are you doing for your community? Like, get involved, dude. Like, don't be. And that was part of our theory at Slabtown, was, you're not watching television. You know, get involved, get engaged, react. And we tried to push people's buttons in a lot of ways. We did some things that were just downright fucking dangerous. We used to grab television sets and old toilets from downstairs, and computer screens and computers and toaster ovens and whatever, and we'd throw them in the center of the room, and we'd give people fucking axes and baseball bats to destroy them. Long pieces of metal pipe to shove through things. And it was not safe at all. It was a stupid idea. It was a brilliantly stupid idea, but it was stupid. And we had a benefit for that with my friend Dave Fisher when he had cancer. where we raised thousands of dollars auctioning things off for people to smash. And you know, but we wanted it to be dangerous. We wanted it to be dangerous with ideas. We wanted it to be a threat. We wanted to, because there's something wrong with parents driving their kids to the show that they're playing and bringing their video recorder so that they can record their kids on stage. No, we want your parents to be afraid of us. We want to be a bad influence on you. We want to fuck up your skull so that when you get out of this place, you go out and do it yourself. And, we were always trying to do things that were memorable. And like that idea, that way of doing things, isn't what a lot of venues are doing. It's hard, it's difficult, and definitely weren't able to do it at anything resembling every show, but it's very difficult when it's a grind, when it's a factory, and you're cranking out shows 5, 6, 7 times a week, making flyers, got to get it on the Facebook, man, all this other stuff. Like, it's hard to make everything a memory with that, but we tried to do that. There aren't a lot of venues that are doing that now. It's hard to, and this is the thing with the chickens coming home to roost, is that when rents start going up, you have to start thinking about, how am I going to make enough money to keep this shit going? Because the people who are working for you, they can't afford to live here on part-time, half-time hours. They're working 2 or 3 jobs now if they're only getting a couple days a week. You got to worry about the cost of things, and the cost of things is going up. Your rent's going to go up. And if it does, and there are landlords here that will just flat out tell you, you keep hitting me up for repairs, I'm going to sell the place. That it's worth more to me to sell than it is for me to repair. So shut the fuck up. And, it's very short-sighted, but it's the pressure that we're under in a very real way. It doesn't help that the music scene is fucking owned by the goddamn alcohol industry. No, it's just the fact that the only way to stay open is through alcohol sales. And so, yeah, you've got some pressure from distributors and this, that, or the other thing. But when we tried to do all ages shows, like, there were certain shows that we just couldn't do. We literally had a show where we had 150 to 175 people in the venue, and we did $110 in bar sales. We needed to have shows where we were doing $2,000 in bar sales. Because, once you take out your cost of goods and you take out your labor and this, that, or the other thing, you're not putting much towards insurance, rent, PA rental, electricity, or any of these other things. So if you're going to be a legit club, if you're going to be legal and not just underground, and underground's very unstable. It's a great idea. It's beautiful, but it's really unstable. If you're going to be one of those clubs that wants to be around for a long time, the alcohol industry is going to own you, because that's how you're going to bring in all of your money. Any considerable amount, any noticeable amount. Teenage kids are not going to pay your rent, and you're not going to sell enough Red Bull or food at a venue to make enough money to support it. The other thing that, like, a lot of venues do is they run gambling. They have a bunch of lotto machines. So they're able to, to flex a little bit more. But goddamn, like, who do you want to belong to? The gambling industry or the liquor industry? Like, both of y'all can go fuck yourselves, Like, as far as industries go, like, they're both dirty businesses. And that's the thing is, when I talk about our culture changing, I think that that's part of it. Is that our relationship with alcohol has changed. That as rents have increased, if people's tastes don't increase, if you're not able to sell them a $9 drink, man, you're going to be out in the cold, like, unless you can keep your rent low. We used to have a downtown core that had low rents. I mean, that's where Ash Street is now, and I'm really surprised. I mean, well, I think that Ash Street probably gets a lot of money off their lotto. I'm guessing. Um, they have some decent sized shows still. I'm not sure what their rent situation is. So they're still downtown. Dante's is downtown. Star Theater's bigger. Dante's is bigger. They can do some really big shows there. But, the X Ray was lost. Well, actually, the Oh Hell after the X Ray was lost to a gospel mission coming in. You can't get cheap enough rent. And Satyricon was knocked down. They just fucking knocked down that building. They don't give a shit, how long it's been around or anything. Uh, but they both had the benefit of cheap rent. They walked in, somebody walked into the business and said, "Hey man, can I start putting on shows at your dinky ass little restaurant?" And the guy said, "Well, yeah, sure." And then all of a sudden, it's like a little venue, and that's not possible in Portland anymore. This whole thing is, you know, we talk about like creatives moving out of town. It's like, go ahead, move the fuck out of town. Like, I don't care where you go. Maybe you go, and I have friends who are talking about going to Scappoose, and I think it's great if people are moving to Gresham or to Aloha or McMinnville or whatever, Milwaukee, Oregon City, some great places to go. Go ahead and go to Texas. Go ahead and go to New York. Like, I don't really give a shit. But the real impact is that those creatives who stay here are no longer part of a community in a physical space the way that they used to be. Part of that is because we're more digital and people go through Facebook and this, that, or the other thing. But as our venues moved out of that downtown core, got further and further apart, you have some sections of the city, like Alberta Street, where you still may run into some people, and there's still a lot of people living in that neighborhood. Not going to be there for very long. And, we have our fingers crossed that the No is going to stay open forever. But I think that there's going to be some point in time where they get shoved out of the neighborhood as well. So you have these little sections of city where people live close to the venues and they may run into other people, but it's nothing like it was. The town was small enough, the community and the music scene was small enough that everybody knew each other. And I was very peripheral to a lot of this. I got to see people and I was able to talk to people, and I doubt that, 90% of them would even remember me, but like I got to shake hands with people and be inspired by them. And, you could run into Ben Ellis someplace from the X-Ray and you could be like, "Hey, you're a fucking X-Ray dude. Like, what the fuck's up?" Like, how do you fucking get away with putting a fucking death metal band from Florida on with fucking, Marnie Thompson playing fucking electric violin? Like, dude, where'd you come up with that idea? And, like, you could talk with people. You could be inspired by them. And when you were inspired, you didn't have to be afraid about saying hello. Star Theater has a really fucking bitchin' sound system. You're not going to build a community with the musicians who are playing there. Maybe you will at Dante's, I don't know. But you're not going to run into people on the street when half of them have moved out to Gresham, half of them have moved to Scappoose, some are still living off Alberta Street, and some have moved down to Oregon City. People will connect with each other in digital spaces, but they won't have that face-to-face contact where they can genuinely inspire each other, create something together, look at each other's artwork in a real physical space and think, wow, that's kind of fucked up, but it's so beautiful. Like, where are we going to get that? And you can't create something that is, really subversively, that's really subversive, where you're going to show people something new that's going to kind of twist them a little bit. Like, it's really hard to do that in a music scene that's driven around, how can I keep the fucking doors open? How much alcohol can I sell? There's some bands that I brought into Slabtown. I will fucking admit it. I brought in some bands that I just knew that the people were gonna fucking drink. And I was like, hell yes. And there were shows that we had to make the decision about whether it was going to be 21 and over and all ages, and we knew that it would sell out either way. We had to go with 21 and over. We had to sell alcohol. And some nights we had to say, there's no room for teenagers because we need to pay the fucking rent and we got debt coming. So, and that's the other thing that happens is, as things become more financially driven and you're making decisions about things like that, the kids are left at the wayside. And I mean, disregard the fact that you're talking about whatever it is, 1/3 of the fucking population or 1/4 of the population, and you're just telling them, like, go fuck yourself. Like, we're not even going to let you in the room. You've got nothing to offer as far as how much alcohol you're going to buy, so you can go, screw off and, play with your toys and your dolls over there or whatever. And, and we need an all ages scene. We need kids. They don't know any better than to fuck up music and create something new. When you get to be my age at 46, like, I know what my bands should sound like. I know what I want to achieve. I've had enough money to invest in my equipment that I can create the sound that I'm looking for. And if I want to cover a band, like, I can do it. I can come up with something that sounds pretty accurate or that hits what it is that I want to do. When you're a 17-year-old kid playing through a 30-watt Fender amp with a borrowed guitar, you're going to come up with a totally different sound, even if you're trying to cover the same song. And it's going to be fucking beautiful because it's going to be different. And you're going to have time to experiment that the rest of us are spending raising kids and working, to pay a lot more rent than a typical 17-year-old pays. Like, you need to have kids. They're going to be the musicians 5 years from then. They're going to be the 22-year-old kids that are going to be making the music that you want to see. And if you want to do a good job of it, you've got to shut the fuck up. You've got to listen to the kids. You can't try to put on them what you think good music is and what a good show is and what is the way that it's supposed to be. That's really hard to do. If you got financial pressure, that's really hard to do. But it is something that we did at Slabtown. I had this thing. I had the Church of Rock and Roll. Like, they were all volunteers. They were all kids. And I would give them direction and I would give them my experience, what it is that I had seen happen in the punk scene, being involved with it as long as I had. But I didn't dictate to them. If they wanted to put on an all-ages rap show with this kid that they know from high school, and I knew that the only people who were going to show up that night were going to be teenagers, like, there were times that I was just like, yeah, do it. Like, you're on it. I gave them the freedom to determine whether or not bands crossed an ethical line with us. That one person could veto a band. And they could be like, yeah, that band's name, I'm not cool with it. I'm transsexual and I don't like it. And I would be like, okay, yeah, they're not playing. Absolutely. And we would have discussions with bands. And we had some bands who changed what it was that they were doing, that they were no longer going to fly the sun wheel, which is that three-pronged swastika that they fly in South Africa. Like, we're not going to fly it. You can change what it is you're doing or you could not play here, but there are plenty of venues that you can play who aren't going to give a fuck. So I tried to hand things over to the kids. I tried to hand things over to women. I tried to hand things over to the queer community to let them just do it their way, and I was going to keep my hands off. And I would give some organizational structure to things, but I wasn't going to tell them which bands to have. And I was telling you a little bit about this before we sat down here. I gotta say, our big failure, our number one failure, was that we did not do a good job of reaching out to people of color. I am very, very highly aware of the privilege that I have in society. I am a middle-aged, 6 foot tall, blue-eyed, educated, very well spoken, smart, um, hardworking, able-bodied. Like I'm not confined to a wheelchair, which has its own limitations. As far as people who are willing to go the distance with you, I'm a cis male. All of that. I have not experienced public places not belonging to me the way that other people have. Um, we did a piss poor job of including people of color in what it is that we did. That's one of my few genuine regrets was that's important. That's really really important. Um, and I believed in the idea of listening to these different subcultures and giving over that power to them. Um, I feel like that's my job. Being faced with the financial realities, it's very hard. It can be a very difficult decision to place your trust in a community that you're not part of. We felt it was important as a group of people, the Church of Rock and Roll, myself, um, at the end, the promoter, Chris Control, that we brought in to handle booking. We felt that it was important that the first step was to hand that over to communities that had been marginalized. That was how we were going to learn about the bands that we wanted to put on other bills. Um, that's where I first saw Cockeye and was able to get to know those guys and try to bring them into other bills. It's where I first saw Labrise, and I was like, metal. And, they happen to be queer metal, and it's like, well, that's fine. Um, it's where we saw the bands where women were not a commodity to be purchased by men or groped by men or anything along those lines. We would get to know those bands, and then we were able to put them on mixed bills so that they could reach out of the cultures that they were in and get respected for what they were producing musically rather than who they were, how they were identified by society at large. To hand over that kind of power, that decision making power, to a group of people is very difficult to do when you're under pressure. So if I weren't here, I would be over at the Sons of Haiti on Mississippi right now. It is one of the last black owned institutions on that street. Um, and a friend of mine, woman who used to work at the club, who curated shows over at Valentine's before coming over to Slabtown and working as a bartender, um, Elizabeth Venable, who does Variable Presents and is the drummer and singer in Sad Horse. Um, she's putting on a D.I.Y. show over there. I would be volunteering to work the door. My band broke up, so it's hard for me to become, like reconnected there. Um, I work 50 hours a week to support myself now, and it's really difficult to be able to really participate in this community, this music community, this creative community, at the level that I want to participate in it. Um, no one has approached me and said, "Will you manage my bar for this venue that I'm operating?" I wish somebody would. So I'm going back to school, try to pick up some computer skills, try to find a job that pays more, where I may not be able to find a job that pays more. I may not be able to, take time off on any given week, but hopefully I'd be able to work and then take time off at the end and be able to commit a large chunk of time to a project. Um, Gosh, as far as the healing goes, man, it still hurts. I'll be honest. Um, there were some really powerful things for me there that we would put on big shows. Or sometimes they were smaller shows, and I think of the Girlfront, festival that we hosted, and the Not Enough festival that we hosted. That, like, these ideas, these shows that had such strong sense of identity and community, and you would see everybody just kind of rocking out to the music and singing along and being part of that. And I would catch the eye of Chris Control, who was behind the soundboard, and we would just kind of look at each other, and it's like, we made this, we did this. Nobody knows, and it doesn't matter. But like, we were the, like, we allowed it to happen. We created a space where these things could take place. And for the shows that we were organizing, when the Zero Boys played and stuff, it's just like, you'd make that connection. You'd see each other across the room, and it's like, man, we did this. We were part of something that people will remember, and that will inspire them to do something different, or not. That maybe it's just a really good memory for them. But, we got to be part of that. And it really fucking sucks to not have that in my life. Um, I wish I did. And I wish I had room for it right now. And the truth is that I just don't. And I don't know when I'll get back to a point where I'll be able to, because I'm 46 years old. And, it was difficult for me at 43 and 44 and 45 to have the energy to put into it. And maybe I could be smarter about it and put a different level of energy into it or something. But I don't think I will ever regain what I lost at Slabtown. Um, like, I mean, we just did so many things that were so personal to us. We had pool parties inside. We celebrated Joey Ramone Day with free pizza for people. We gave each other tattoos at the bar when things got slow. When we didn't have heat, I would break out the 151, pour it in a fucking pan, and light it on fire for people to warm their hands. Like, we did some really fucked up things, but they were so special to us. And they were things that you wouldn't get someplace else. And, man, it's just like, there's still a hole in me where Slabtown used to be. And I don't, and the unfortunate thing is, like, I don't really see any place stepping up with that. Like, I love Anaris. The Anaris info shop is fucking incredible. And they're straight out of, like, 1994. Little fucking photocopied zines, info shop with shows in the back. Like, when have you seen that? Like, you know, hey, where's the info shop? Fucking 1999. That's where it is. Um, those guys are fucking awesome. Blackwater, incredible. And it's got a community at Blackwater. It's a different community than the one that I feel like I belong to, but they've got a strong community. The stuff that Venable's doing, Variable Presents, is great, interesting thing. And her thing, her policy is she's not going to put on a single band that's just four dudes. Like, she wants to involve women in what's going on. She wants to involve people of color. She wants to involve, people from the queer community. It's not going to be four straight white cis dudes. you know, two guitars and a bass player and a drummer. And that's awesome. And it's great to be a part of, as far as being able to show up twice a month when she puts on shows and just sit at the door and participate in it so that it can happen, without somebody who's organizing the show having to sit at the door too. But no, there's something missing, and I don't know who's going to pick up the torch for that stuff, and I don't know if it's going to be able to happen in Portland, to be honest. Um, and that's one of the things that makes me really sad. Like, I wish that I could have made, I wish I could have made Slaptown happen, and I had some people who came through, and they're like, "Dude, I've got $20,000. You want to go?" And I was like, I can't. I can't do it, man, because I don't know if we're going to be successful, even with a $20,000 infusion. And we had a lot of people, there was a Kickstarter campaign. A lot of people donated to that. Thousands and thousands of dollars. I wasn't willing to take it because I couldn't guarantee that the money that was put in would continue what it was that we were doing. I don't see anybody picking up the torch for weird, for subversive, really subversive, not just angry subversive, but like really fucking with your head subversive. Um, parents didn't like us, and they shouldn't. They would drop off their kids and then they'd circle the block to see what the hell their kids were doing. And yeah, it was so funny. Like I was literally like I was standing out in front of Slabtown with a friend of mine at one point. We saw these two kids get dropped off by their dad, and I looked at him. I'm like, man, what do you think they think? Like, what do parents think when they're dropping off their kids here in the fucking dark with the spray painted walls and everything, and people hanging outside smoking cigarettes? You know, I don't know. The kids walk in, the kids walk out. They immediately light up cigarettes, and here comes Dad around the corner again. He circled the block. Come here. And he waves them into the car and fucking busts their asses, and then sends them back into the show. But, like, they knew not to trust us. I was going to do fucked up things with their kids, man. I was going to mess with them. I didn't, yeah. Like, I wasn't going to sit idly by. It sucks, to be honest. I can't, the thing that really sucks was I became really close to the people that I worked with. I relied on them. I loved them fucking dearly. I never see them. They're busy with their lives. But the punk scene, the D.I.Y. scene, will survive here. It'll be some out-of-the-way place in the Cully neighborhood, or up on Lombard, or St. John's, Oregon City. There's a lot of angry young people in Milwaukee. They need something to do, and they'll make it for themselves. But I don't know if I'm gonna stumble across it to be part of it, and I'm not capable of sitting idly by. Like, if I walk into a show, like, I can't just stand there. I'm gonna heckle you. I'm gonna talk to you as if you and I are on the same level. Like, I'm not, like, you're not a rock star to me. I don't fucking give a fuck about, like, who you think you are. I can't walk into a show and turn that off. So I don't know where I'm going to find that community. I crave it. I may have to create it again. I may have to try to get a high-paying job where I can save up money and do it again, or I may have to try to find that person who's willing to take a chance on, some fucked up egomaniac, who has fucking visions of what the world is supposed to be, a lot of stupid ideas that are brilliant in their own weird way. If I do say so myself, like, we had a lot of ideas that were both stupid and brilliant at the same time. And yeah, I'm still grieving the loss of that energy.
Cutting loose, he's drinking juice.